Hello everyone, in this estimation, control theory, signal processing and data science tutorial, we provide a clear and concise explanation of a particle filter algorithm. We focused on the problem of using the particle filter algorithm for state estimation of dynamical systems. Besides providing a detailed explanation of particle filters, we also explain how to implement the particle filter algorithm from scratch in Python. Due to the objective complexity of particle filters, we split the tutorial into 3 parts and 3 separate videos. You're currently watching the first part. In this tutorial part, we define the particle filter estimation problem. We explain what is the main goal of particle filters and what particle filters are actually computing, or better to say, estimating. We also clearly explain the concepts of state transition probability, measurement probability, and posterior distribution. In the second tutorial part, we will explain the particle filter algorithm, and in the third tutorial part, we will explain how to implement the particle filter in Python from scratch. Links to these video tutorials will be provided in the description below this video tutorial. By the end of this tutorial series, you will be able to simulate a particle filter algorithm in Python. Also, you will be able to generate this amazing simulation showing the behavior of a particle filter. Here you can see how a particle filter is tracking a state of a second-order dynamical system. The state is denoted by the red circle, and the particles of the particle filter are denoted by blue circles. This tutorial series is specially designed for students who are not experts in statistics and for students who are not experts in control theory. We thoroughly explain all the used statistics concepts. Nowadays, there is a trend not to thoroughly study theoretical concepts and to quickly jump to Python script implementing the algorithms, and without properly understanding the theoretical background. If you follow such an approach, you will never be able to understand particle filters, and you will not be able to understand the Python implementation of particle filters. To properly understand particle filters, you need to first properly understand important concepts from dynamical system theory, probability theory, and statistics. These concepts are thoroughly explained in this video tutorial. Consequently, reserve some time and stay focused while watching this video tutorial. Do not immediately jump to the second or third parts without properly understanding the material presented in this video tutorial. That is, this tutorial is not for students who easily give up. Proper understanding and explanation of particle filters requires effort from both the students and instructors' side. We did our part by creating this concise video tutorial, and your part is to put some effort to understand the material presented in this video tutorial. Here's a brief outline of what we explain in this video tutorial. We explain what are state space models. We explain what are the process disturbance and measurement noise of state space models. Then we explain what is a transition state probability of a state space model. We then explain what is a measurement probability of a state space model. Then we explain what is a Markov process. Then we explain the classical state estimation problems, such as recursive and batch state estimation problems. Then we explain the main difference between particle filter estimation problems and classical estimation problems. We then explain what is a posterior distribution in particle filter estimation problems. We proceed by explaining what are particles in particle filter algorithms. We then explain what are weights and state space samples in particle filter algorithms. Then we provide an intuitive explanation of the approximation of posterior distribution by using discrete probability involving particles. And finally, we define the problem of estimating the posterior distribution by using particle filters. By the end of this video tutorial, you will be able to understand this very important graph as well as this one, that illustrate the main ideas of particle filters. Okay, let's start with explanations. First, we explain the concept of a state space model of a dynamical system. Then we introduce statistical distributions that are related to the state space models. Finally, we define the state estimation problem for particle filters. First, we need to define what is a state space model of a dynamical system. In a fairly general form, models of dynamical systems are represented by the state and the output equation. In this representation, xk is the state vector at the discrete time step k. uk minus 1 is the control input vector at the time step k minus 1. Wk minus 1 is the process disturbance vector or process noise vector at the time step k minus 1. Yk is the observed output vector at the time step k, and Vk is actually the measurement noise vector at the discrete time step k. In the most general case, the functions f and g are nonlinear functions. It is always important to keep in mind the following facts when dealing with state space models of dynamical systems. First of all, the state of the system xk is not completely observable. To repeat, the state of the system xk is usually not completely observable. We can only observe or sense the output of the system denoted by yk. The main purpose of state estimators is to estimate the state of the system xk by using the measurements of yk. Then this vector wk minus 1 is the process disturbance vector. This vector is also called the process noise vector. The exact value of this vector is usually not known unless we use a method to estimate its value. However, we can model the statistics of this vector. For example, we can model or estimate the mean and the covariance matrix of the distribution describing the statistics of wk minus 1. In practice, this vector can, for example, mathematically model stochastic state disturbances affecting the dynamics. Some researchers also use this vector to take into account model uncertainties. We will talk more about the statistics of this vector later on in this video tutorial. Then the vector Vk is the measurement noise vector. In practice, the measurement process or sensors introduce noise in the observed variables. The vector Vk is used to mathematically model the sensor or measurement process noise. Similar to the process disturbance vector, we don't know the exact value of the measurement noise vector Vk. Instead, we can either model or estimate the statistical description of this vector. For example, we can model or estimate the mean and the covariance matrix of the statistical distribution of this vector. We will talk more about this vector later on in this video tutorial. The vector uk minus 1 is the control input vector. We assume that the control input vector is perfectly known. This is because the control algorithm computes the numerical value of the control input vector. Now, for clarity and not to blur the main ideas of particle filters with too many details of complex nonlinear functions, in this tutorial and other parts of the tutorial series, we assume that the model is linear and that it has this form, where A, B, and C are state, input, and output system matrices. Everything explained in this video tutorial can be generalized to a broad class of nonlinear systems represented by this equation. Here we explain the statistics of random vectors in our state space model. The proper understanding of the statistics of the vectors is important for the proper understanding and implementation of particle filters. First of all, let's make a few additional assumptions. We introduce these assumptions for simplicity and for presentation clarity. And of course, everything explained in this video tutorial can be generalized to more broad statistical descriptions. First of all, we assume that the process disturbance vector wk is a Gaussian random vector. That is, the vector wk is distributed according to the Gaussian distribution, which is also known as the normal distribution in statistics. We assume that the mean of wk is 0 and that the covariance matrix is equal to q. In the general case, the mathematical notation for Gaussian random vectors is wk, and then we have this symbol here that looks like similarity symbol. Then we have calligraphic n, and inside we have 0, q. This notation means that the vector wk is distributed according to the normal distribution with a mean of 0 and with a covariance matrix of q. In the general case, a vector with the mean of mu and the covariance matrix Cm is said to be distributed according to n mu, Cm. That is, the first entry in this notation is the mean and the second entry is the covariance matrix. Then, we assume that the measurement noise vector Vk, here is Vk, is also Gaussian random vector. We assume that the mean of Vk is 0 and that the covariance matrix is R. Or by using statistical notation, we can write this. Vk, then we have this similarity, which means distributed according to normal distribution with the mean 0 and the covariance matrix of R. We introduce these assumptions to simplify the explanation of particle filters. However, particle filters can be used when random vectors have non-Gaussian probability distributions. And that's the main power, actually, of particle filters. In our previous tutorial, we explained how to simulate the stochastic state space models, such as the one that we are dealing with in our video tutorial. A link to that tutorial is given over here. And I will provide a link to this tutorial in the description below this video tutorial. By using the simulation principle explained in this video tutorial, we can obtain this important graph. This graph shows a state space trajectory of a second-order stochastic linear state space model. That is, the state dimension in this state space model is equal to 2. The state trajectory starts from here and ends here. At every simulation step, we introduce a stochastic process disturbance vector that creates this randomness in the state space trajectory. That is, in every time step of simulation, wk-1 is sampled from a normal Gaussian distribution. Here, it's very important to understand the following. If we would repeat the simulation from the same initial condition, we would obtain a completely different state space trajectory. This is the direct consequence of the stochastic nature of the state space model. That is, this is the direct consequence of the fact that at every time step, we sample wk-1 from a normal distribution. And every time we repeat an experiment, we will obtain a different sequence of wk-1. Over here, we need to understand one very important fact. In this state space description, wk-1 is random. This means that for a known value of xk-1 and for given value of uk-1, the vector xk, that is the state at the time instant k, is also a random vector. That is, the randomness of the process disturbance induces a probability distribution of xk. This probability is called the state transition probability. Other names for this probability are next state probability or transition probability. The state transition distribution or state transition probability plays a very important role in particle filters. The probability density function of the state transition probability is denoted like this. This is a probability density function of a conditional probability. That is, this is a probability density function of a probability xk under the assumption that the values of xk-1 and uk-1 are known and fixed. Now, the main question is, What is the mathematical form of the state transition probability? Since the vector wk minus 1 in the state equation is normally distributed, and since the state equation is linear, we conclude that the state transition probability belongs to the class of normal distributions. That is, xk is normally distributed. The mean of this distribution can be computed by computing expectation of this equation, and it's given by this equation. This is because the expectation of wk minus 1 is equal to 0. The covariance matrix is actually equal to the covariance of wk or the covariance of wk minus 1. That is, the covariance of the state transition distribution is q. From this, we conclude that the state transition distribution is a normal distribution with the mean given by this expression and with the covariance matrix of q. The mathematical form of the state transition probability density function is a standard normal probability density function given by this equation. Over here, n is the state dimension. On the other hand, since the measurement vector vk is a random vector, the output measurement vector yk is also a random vector. The probability of yk is called the measurement probability. The measurement distribution or measurement probability also plays a very important role in particle filters. The probability density function of the measurement probability is denoted like this. This is a probability density function of the conditional probability that's derived under the assumption that the value of xk is known and fixed. Now, the main question is, what is the mathematical form of the measurement probability? Since the output equation, that is this equation, is linear and the vector vk is distributed according to the normal distribution, we conclude that the measurement probability belongs to the class of normal distributions. The mean of this distribution is computed by computing the expectation of this equation, and it's equal to c times xk, and the covariance is r. Consequently, we conclude that the probability density function of our measurement distribution is given by this equation, where in this equation r is the dimension of the output vector. Here we need to explain an additional concept that you will need to understand in order to understand the derivation of the particle filter that we will present in the next tutorial. Namely, often in estimation and statistics literature, you will encounter the term Markov process or a Markov chain. Loosely speaking, a stochastic process is Markov if the state probability at the current time step depends only on the state and known constants from the previous time step. This means that state sequence x0, x1, x2, x3, then until xk minus 1, then xk, then xk plus 1, and we keep on increasing the index of the state, is generated such that the probability of moving from the previous state, that is from the state xk minus 1, to the current state xk only depends on the previous state xk minus 1. That is, the transition probability of a Markov process does not depend on the past states xk minus 2, xk minus 3, and until x0. From the mathematical point of view, this means that the probability density function of a Markov process must satisfy this equation. However, since an output equation also participates in a state space model description, for a state space model to be a Markov state space model, we also need an additional requirement. This requirement is that the output probability at the current time step depends only on the state and known constants at the current time step. This means that the output probability of our model, or the output probability density of our model, must satisfy this equation. Obviously, our linear state space model is a Markov state space model due to its structure. To be able to understand the state estimation problem for particle filters, one first needs to understand the classical state estimation problem. The classical state estimation problem is to estimate the state at the current time step k by using, first of all, by using the state space model of the system, then by using past state estimates up to and not including the current time step k, that is by using x0 hat, x1 hat, x2 hat, and until xk minus 1 hat. Here, the hat notation denotes the state estimate. Then we need to use past observed outputs up to and including the current time step k, that is y0, y1, y2, and until yk, and by using past control inputs up to and not including the time step k, that is by using u0, u1 until uk minus 1. That is, the classical state estimation problem is to compute the state estimate xk hat by incorporating all available information up to the current time step k. Generally speaking, the classical state estimation problem can be solved by using three approaches. The first approach is to use the batch mathematical formulation, where the state is directly estimated by solving an optimization problem involving a sequence of past inputs and output data. The most basic estimator that uses this idea is an open-loop least squares observer, which we explained in our previous tutorial. And here is our tutorial. This tutorial explains the open-loop observers and gives MATLAB implementation of open-loop observers. I will provide this link in the description below this video tutorial. The second approach is to recursively or sequentially or iteratively estimate the state at the time step k by using the past state estimate and the past input information from the previous time step k minus 1, as well as the output of the system at the time step k. The most popular recursive estimators are the Lumberger observer and the Kalman filter. We covered these recursive estimators in our previous tutorials. And here are the links to our previous tutorials. I will provide these links in the description below this video tutorial. The third approach is to combine the first and the second approaches. The third approach is called the moving horizon estimation. We will cover the moving horizon estimation approach in our future tutorials. Almost all of the so far mentioned estimation approaches produce a single estimate of the state vector. That is, they aim at directly computing xk hat. Also, under the assumption that the process and measurement noise are Gaussian and under the assumption that dynamics is linear, we can use these approaches to extract the covariance matrix of the estimation error and some other useful Gaussian statistics that can help us to evaluate and quantify the estimation uncertainty and statistical properties of the state estimate xk hat. However, when the measurement noise and the process noise are not Gaussian and when the dynamics is not linear, it becomes challenging to extract statistical information about the estimate and to quantify this estimation uncertainty. On the other hand, particle filters use a completely different estimation approach and philosophy. Instead of mainly being focused on computing a single state estimate, particle filters aim at estimating a probability distribution or a probability density function of the state xk conditioned on the output observation y0, y1 until yk and on the past control inputs u0, u1 and until uk minus 1. By using the Bayesian estimation terminology, this distribution is called the posterior distribution or posterior probability. The probability density function of the posterior probability is denoted like this, where this notation and this notation denote the sets of inputs and outputs. The set of outputs is defined like this. It starts from y0 and includes all the elements, that is, all the outputs until yk. On the other hand, the set of inputs is defined like this. It starts from u0 and includes all inputs until uk minus 1. In robotics literature, the posterior probability is also called the belief distribution. Also, some researchers call the posterior density as the filtering density. The vertical bar in the notation for the posterior probability density function, that is this vertical bar, means that this posterior is computed by using the information available in the output and inputs sets. This figure shows a simulated state space trajectory of a second-order system and a possible posterior distribution at the time step k. The trajectory starts from the initial state, denoted by this black circle. The red line represents the state space trajectory. This magenta circle represents the true state xk at the discrete time instant k, and the posterior distribution is given over here. The posterior distribution is represented by the contour plot. The colors represent the values of the probability density function. The brighter the color is, the higher value of the probability density function of the posterior distribution. As we will explain in the sequel, the whole purpose and the main goal of particle filters is to estimate this posterior distribution. The posterior probability encapsulates the complete statistical information about the posterior state. The knowledge of the posterior probability enables us to accurately compute important statistical quantities related to our estimate, such as the mean, which can serve also as a form of an estimate, covariance matrix, higher order moments, mode, confidence intervals, etc. We can also formulate an estimate as some other statistical measure that is computed on the basis of the posterior probability density function. That is, the complete solution to the state estimation problem is the posterior probability or posterior probability density function. Motivated by this, a particle filter estimation algorithm aims at reconstructing or estimating the posterior probability density function or posterior probability of state. That is, in sharp contrast to the classical estimation algorithms that are mainly focused on computing a single state estimate and possibly moments of distributions related to the estimation problem, the particle filter aim at reconstructing or estimating the complete posterior probability density function of the state. This is a very important thing to understand. The output of the particle filter is a discrete approximation of the posterior probability density function. The output is actually a set of particles approximating the distribution. Let us now explain what are the particles in particle filters. Generally speaking, a particle is defined by the state xk with the superscript of I that is also known as the state sample, and the associated weight that is also known as the importance weight, and that is usually denoted by wk with the superscript I. The particle is denoted like this compactly. The set of particles is denoted like this. We take all the particles, we group them together for the index I going from 1, 2, 3, and until n. The weights are normalized such that their sum is equal to 1. Loosely speaking, the weights tells us how important each particle or point, or better to say sample point, is. By knowing the weights and the samples, we can actually approximate the posterior distribution like this. In this notation, this symbol delta is the symbol for Dirac delta function. The Dirac delta function is shifted and centered at the sample xk with the superscript I. In probability theory, the Dirac delta function is used to represent a distribution of discrete variables by using the probability density function of the continuous variables. That is, the Dirac delta function is used to extend the definition of the probability density function for discrete random variables. This is very important to understand, so spend some time understanding this. For example, let us assume that we have a discrete set of values or points that some random variable z can take. Let's say that we have z1, z2 until zn. Let the probabilities at these points be pi1, pi2, until pi(n). The set of points and probabilities define a probability mass function pz. such that Pz at the point Zi is actually equal to probability Pi, and I goes from 1, 2, 3 until n. Then the probability density function can be mathematically written like this. That is, we can write it down by using the Dirac delta function. Now, by using this probability theory fact, we can interpret the weights Wk with the superscript I in this representation. If we use this important probability theory fact, then we can conclude that the weights actually can be interpreted as probabilities at the points xk with the superscript I of the discrete distribution that approximates the posterior distribution. For example, let us consider a simple case. Let us assume that the samples are scalars, that is, that the states are scalars. And let us assume that we only have 4 particles. First particle, second particle, third particle, and fourth particle. For example, if weights are interpreted as probabilities of a discrete distribution, we can see that the probability of state being actually in this state, that is in the state xk with the superscript 2, is equal to 0.6. On the other hand, the probability of states being equal to this state, xk, with the superscript 3 is equal to 0.1. And notice over here that all the weights sum up to 1. Next, let's consider another example. This example shows a two-dimensional state space trajectory that starts from this point, that is, that starts from this black circle, and the red line represents the state space trajectory. The true state at the time instant k is denoted by this magenta circle over here. The light green circles represent the particles. Every particle consists of the state and the corresponding weight. The weight value is represented by the radius of the light green circles. The larger the value of the weight is, the larger the radius of the circle is. And you can see the size of the weights over here. These particles actually approximate the posterior distribution. For example, since the weight of this particle is the largest, there is the largest or the highest probability of our actual state being in this point. And you can see that this circle is very close to the true state. Generally speaking, the knowledge of the particles represented by this set enables us to approximate any statistical moment, that is, mean, covariance, and higher order moments, as well as expectation of a nonlinear function of state by using this equation, where in this equation E is the expectation operator and d of xk is in the general case a nonlinear function. For example, if we want to compute the expectation, the function d of xk is simply equal to xk. To conclude, by computing the particles represented by this set, we can approximate the posterior state distribution and we can approximate any statistics of the state. Now we are ready to formulate the estimation problem for particle filters. We will actually formulate 2 problems. Here's the first problem. This is a general estimation problem for the posterior distribution. By using the information about number 1, state space model of the system, number 2, transition probability, number 3, measurement probability, number 4, observed outputs y0, y1, y2 until yk, and applied control inputs u0, u1, u2 until uk-1, and by using initial guess of the particles given by this set, at every time step k, estimate the set of particles, that is, estimate this set that approximate the posterior distribution of the state xk given by this equation. That is, we want to estimate the state samples xk with the superscript I and the weight wk with the superscript I, where the index goes from 1, 2 until n, and this set of particle approximates the posterior distribution, and it approximates it like this. This estimation problem is defined in the batch estimation framework. The particle filter algorithm solves this problem recursively. Consequently, let us define the recursive estimation problem. This is the estimation problem number 2, and this problem formulates the problem of recursively estimating the posterior distribution. Again, by using the state space model of the system, by using the transition probability, by using the measurement probability, by using the observed output yk and the control input uk minus 1 that's applied at the previous step k minus 1, and by using the set of particles computed at the time step k minus 1, here's the set of particle, and notice the index k minus 1 over here. At the time step k, we want to compute the set of particles, here's the set, and notice the time index of k. That is, we want to go from this set that has a time index of k minus 1 to this set that has a time index of k. And this set recursively approximates the posterior distribution given by this equation. You should notice over here the main difference between these two problem formulations. The first problem formulation uses all the information up to the time instant k to approximate the posterior distribution. The second problem actually uses the information from the previous time step k minus 1, as you can see over here, and as you can see over here, to approximate the posterior distribution at the time step k. And that's it. This is the main estimation problem for particle filters. We want to develop an algorithm that will update the set of sample and weights to compute a new set of samples and weights. Okay, that would be all for today. I hope that you like this video. If you like the videos I'm creating, please press the like and subscribe buttons, and see you in the next video tutorial.